Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, Painting the Mail, Post Office Art of the New Deal. I'm Susan Ives, Communications Director for the Living New Deal, a nonprofit founded at UC Berkeley that for more than a dozen years has been popularizing the idea of a New Deal. Our mission is to preserve the New Deal's legacy by making people aware of what the New Deal was and did, and to promote the New Deal as a model of enlightened leadership and good government. Our website, livingnewdeal.org, documents more than 17,000 New Deal sites across the country and counting, and is a source of information about the New Deal's policies, programs, and the people who led the nation through the Great Depression. Today's been an exciting day for us and a busy one. Last night, the PBS NewsHour ran a 6-minute profile about the Living New Deal. That report has led thousands to our website and Facebook page, and hundreds have been signing up to hear from us. If you haven't as yet, you too can sign up to receive our monthly newsletter, The Fireside, and invitations to upcoming events and public programs like this one. If you have a few minutes, please stay on this call at the end of tonight's presentation. We'll be showing the 6-minute segment on the Living New Deal that aired last night on the NewsHour. Thanks for joining us on tonight's webinar, Painting the Mail. We'll be hearing from Barbara Bernstein, the Living New Deal's public art specialist who founded the Deal Art Registry, a crowdsourcing website that has collected photos and data about thousands of New Deal public murals and sculptures around the country. Before moving to California, Barbara uncovered long forgotten public works in her native Chicago. And in 1976, she made the award-winning documentary Silver Lining about the Illinois art project of the WPA and formed friendships with many of the local New Deal artists. Please join in the conversation by writing your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and Barbara will answer as many as she can after her presentation. We hope you enjoyed tonight's program and that you will stay with us for a few minutes more following the Q&A to watch the PBS NewsHour segment about us. Your donations make our work and programs like this available to everyone free of charge. We depend on your support. And now please welcome Barbara Bernstein.
Hi, thank you, Susan. Hi, everybody. I want to say, first of all, that I'm just getting over a cold. I don't usually sound like Lauren Bacall. I sound weird, but I actually feel fine, so just bear with me. As Susan said, I'm a public art person. I've spent decades looking for and seeking out and photographing and putting up on the web pictures of the major works that the New Deal created, the murals, the sculptures, the bas-reliefs. And I'm always eager to show people some of the work that was done by these artists who were working under government sponsorship. They created a public art museum that's all around us, and we're still enjoying this investment in art that was made by our grandparents' generation. This stuff sticks around, thank goodness. It's full of variety, it's full of vigor, it's full of idealism, and some of it is really very beautiful. There is so much New Deal public art around that I had to narrow it down, so I decided to focus on post office art, partly because post offices are the most accessible place that you can see this public art now. You don't need to make an appointment, you don't need to go through a security screening, which is what's happening with a lot of our public spaces. In a post office, you can still just walk in and look around. And to narrow it down further, since there are still hundreds of works of art in post offices, I decided it would be fun to look at art that is not just in post offices, but about the post office, about the postal service, about the writing and delivering and reading of mail, kind of through American history and at what was then the present day in the 1930s and 40s. As I selected and organized these works of art, I was really struck again by the subtext to what they were doing, this sense of connection, of community, of mutual interdependence, and of public service. And because of that, it really made me think that the town post office is the physical manifestation of the relationship between the federal government and the community and the individual. And this vision of the post office is something that we're in danger of losing as post offices close and get consolidated and sold off. So, kind of to my surprise, since I'm not really a very political person, I'm going to end this presentation with a bit of a pitch for keeping post offices open and finding new ways to put them to the use of the public. And I have some suggestions on how that might be done. It was an agenda of the New Deal to provide government services to people where they lived, in the communities where they lived. And I don't think that's something that we have lost the need for. So I'm going to share my screen. And let's look at some art. It's nice to be talking to a Living New Deal audience because I don't think I have to give you a lot of background. There was a depression, a lot of people were out of work. Franklin Roosevelt was elected president, and he launched this massive public works program. I think you're with me on all that. And I think you probably also know that these public works included the building of many post offices in cities all around the country. This is a map from our Living New Deal website, and as each dot is a post office that was either built or significantly remodeled by the New Deal. And as you'll see, they are spread out all over the place. They're in every state. And if you drew a line connecting them, you would have a World Wide Web. You would have a network of communication, which is just what the Postal Service is. They built post offices in towns and in villages and in big cities. And this was not just a practical matter. It did, provide work for many people, and it did make the mail service more efficient, but it had a symbolic importance too. It sort of meant that the government back there in Washington, D.C., far away, cared about your town. And it was going to build a place where you could access that vast network of communication that was on the map. You could get services, you could see your neighbors, you could find out who the 10 most wanted people the FBI was looking for. And they put an American flag right out in front. So when I'm driving around looking for post offices, I drive up Main Street, and when I see a flag, I know I got there. Part of the outreach of this post office building project was that often included sending an artist to town to create a mural, a bas-relief, a sculpture, particularly for that site, particularly for that town. And often it showed something about your town or your region or your history. The policy was that 1% of the total cost of the building was devoted to decoration. Commissions for these post office artworks were awarded by competition, and usually they were given to artists who were already somewhat established and had a track record. Now, this is different from the WPA, which hired people who were unemployed, who were on relief, and paid them a monthly salary. The post office commissions were run differently. They were one-shots. This wasn't a permanent job. So there are no WPA murals in post offices. I don't mean to sound pedantic, but that drives me nuts. The post offices were put up not by the WPA, but by a different government agency. This is a sketch that was done at the time by an artist who had won a commission for the mural in Shelton, Connecticut. And if you can read it, you can see that he's measured the dimensions of the room and figured out what the sight lines are. And I think that's going to decide kind of how he does the composition of the mural so that it can be seen. I have to tell you, this is such a familiar layout of a post office. As I've traveled around the country looking at post office murals, this is the most familiar one. You go up the front steps, you walk into this little vestibule, you go through the door and you turn left. And if you're lucky, there's a mural. The idea of putting murals in post offices caught the public fancy. And here you see that the sophisticated New Yorker thought it was all very twee and seemed a little silly, but it was really important to people in the town. By the way, the CWA that's in the caption there was an early New Deal agency. It was soon superseded by the WPA and zillions of other alphabet soup agencies. Post office murals were under the auspices of the Treasury Department of Fine Arts. So it was the Treasury Department, which also built the post offices. It was the Treasury Department that funded the murals and that ran the competitions. Here's another comic strip about post office murals. But Dad, they did it at the post office. Pay special attention to the what the artist in the first panel is painting. It's a mural of a guy riding a horse into the sunset. And if you can see, his saddlebag says Pony Express. That was a favorite topic of New Deal post office artists. And we'll see later some examples of that. The post office mural kind of epitomizes the New Deal. And the one in this New Yorker cover is not atypical. Mail delivery was, of course, a favorite topic. And this mural, kind of parodies the grandiose symbolism, the historical sweep, and the kind of collage-like combination of different modes of transportation that was not really uncommon. For example, this mural. Transportation of the mail. It's in the old post office headquarters building in Washington, D.C. And you can see that it shows various phases of mail delivery and sorting, and then the postman handing it right into the hand of the customer. A rather sinister looking little girl, but okay. Let me go back for a minute. We're going to start to look at post office murals in some depth. And I've divided it kind of chronologically into writing, sorting, transporting, delivering, and then reading the mail. And I've put the name of the work of art and the city that the post office is in down in the lower right-hand corner. I hope you'll notice the kind of geographic scope. They are all over the country. They're in towns you've never heard of and very big cities. So writing. This is called The Letter. And it was done by Isamu Noguchi, who became a very famous sculptor and landscape architect. Here's another lady writing a letter. And now the mail has to be collected. And sorted. This is another mural in that old post office headquarters in Washington. And it's a great New Deal type mural, men, machines, a process at work. This bas-relief is in Berkeley, the home of Living New Deal. And it's in front of the post office there, which was almost sold off to a private developer. We'll hear about that later. Here's another post office sorting mural. I apologize for the glare. It's what we people who try to photograph these murals have to put up with. The lighting is usually terrible. And if there isn't a fluorescent light in front of the mural, it's very dark and you have to use a flash, and then you get an effect like this. I should add, by the way, I did not take all of these photographs, not by a long shot. These were contributed by many people who travel around and look at post offices, and I got some off the web, and they come from many sources. I can't take credit. This is by Reginald Marsh, who was very well known at the time. And I love the kind of rounded shapes of the bags of mail and the shoulders of the men and the heads of the men. Excuse me. So now, after sorting the mail, we have to move it around the country. And here you see a train, a truck, a plane, a ship, a bicycle, and a handcart. This is actually only 1/3 of this enormous mural that wraps all around the San Pedro post office. Here again, you see mail transportation, sort of past, present, and future. Here's the spirit of the mail. She's clutching a bag of mail. There's a train below her. There's a ship behind her. And I couldn't resist. Here she is again. That scantily dressed woman. She's picking up the mail here. There's sort of a goddess of the mail thing that you see every once in a while. This one seems to be pushing along a truck and a train and moving things around the country. The stagecoach was a favorite topic when it came to the means of transporting the mail. You notice this says the romance of the mail must go through. Mail delivery and settling the West kind of went hand in hand. It was a sign of civilization if you could get mail from back east. It meant that you were connected to the rest of the country, no matter how far west you were living, how remote your homestead was. So this mural shows two things that tied the growing country together: the early mail service and the construction of the railroads. This could be a scene from a Western movie. You might notice that below the driver, it says US Mail, and that there's a rifle, a rifle barrel peeking out from behind the curtain in the stagecoach window. Choctaw Indians see the first mail coach. The Pony Express was very popular. The Pony Express started out from St. Joseph, Missouri. That was the opposite of the terminus. It was where it started. So of course their post office has this very pretty mural by an Illinois artist named Gustav Dahlstrom. And horses, in fact, were changed in Horton, Kansas. And this is a mural showing that. The Pony Express didn't get to Michigan at all, but I thought this was a nice mural, so I just stuck it in here. And this mural, again in Washington, D.C., the Pony, it's called Pony Express, but it really is just a panorama of the whole sweep of Western settlement, including, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, a massacre of Indians. And in the lower right-hand corner, the sort of classic Western town that you see in movies all the time. Airmail, another very popular topic. Notice the wings attached to the envelope and that telltale airmail border of red and blue that's around the outside that used to be so exciting when you got a letter like that. The use of airplanes made it seem like the post office was using the latest technology and doing everything it could to get its mail to you as fast as it possibly could. If you were lucky, You could get your letter delivered by a god. Even a hunky one, even better. So in this mural, you see the Pony Express guy in the background and the brave airmail pilot in the middle ground. And then in the foreground, you see the actual mail delivery people, because now it's time to get the mail delivered to the people. Because waiting for the mail was really important. This mural is called Waiting for the Mail, and I think the deliverer has just driven up in that car. This is beautiful. I love the colors, and I love the tension between the mother's arm holding onto the child who's pulling away and the little girl leaning forward. This is just one of my favorites. And it's in Goodlands, Kansas. So I'll probably never get to see it in person. The postman was a familiar and popular public servant. He was an important member of the community. This mural, by the way, is by Victor Arnautoff, who did the controversial murals that were at thank goodness, that are at George Washington High School in San Francisco. Maybe you read about that controversy. This mural, the post office is gone. This mural is being restored and is supposedly going to be returned to Richmond and put in some other public building. Here's the mailman persevering under adverse conditions and slightly less adverse. The reach of the post office was a point of pride. Here, the mail has been delivered by airplane to the Indies. This is quite a striking mural. And to the Arctic. So the mail service linked the continent as well as the country. And this is shown by a set of 4 bas-reliefs that are on the exterior of the main downtown post office in Philadelphia. Mail delivery, north and south and east and west. And even the unsigned decoration that was a sort of an architectural element of buildings carried on the theme of mail delivery. Here you can see letters pouring out of the pouches, the mail pouches that are sort of in the middle, into the hands of the mail person who's going to deliver them. And there's wings, and there's corn, and there's wheat. There's just everything you would want. Picking up the mail was a big event. As this mural shows, the mail probably came in on the train that's steaming back off on the right side of the mural. And now, time to read your letters and open your packages, because of course the post office delivered packages too. And sharing the news. In this one, notice that some people are overjoyed by their mail and some people are dejected. Rural free delivery was a point of pride because it meant that everybody, even the most remote person, was a member of the post office network. in Bushnell, Illinois. You can see at the far left, the mail carrier sort of riding away on his horse. In Vidalia, Georgia. I love how they're sitting on top of the postmaster's door. This one's called The Family, but look how they're gathered around a letter. As is this family. It's amazing that any plowing ever got done, people were always stopping to read their mail. The mail also brought newspapers and wanted posters and flyers and advertisements. This one, you probably can't tell, but news from the States is in quotes, because at the time shown in this mural, Montana was not part of the United States yet. So this was news from way back there. And here's one of my favorites, Good News and Bad. It's so atmospheric. And here's like the end of the process after all of that sorting and riding horses and driving trucks and flying airplanes and walking the postal beat. What really counts is that people are gathered around and in communication with somebody they care about. Now, the post office that mural, that wood carving that I just showed you in is slated for demolition. And that's what I would like to talk about in the second part of my presentation. I hope that you feel a little inspired by these celebrations of the US Post Office. They're idealized, but there's really a spirit of truth there. The post office was important in United States history. It brought cohesiveness, connection among regions, common experience, and most of all, it embodied a beneficial relationship between public servants and the public. So the question is, can this survive into the age of electronic communication and social media and privatization? And that's what I want to talk about next. So I'm going to share my screen again. Just hold on. Oh, great. Thank you. This is the problem. Post offices are closing left and right. 1,600 post offices have been suspended or discontinued since the year 2000. And suspended means, quote, temporarily closed, but it really means permanently closed. There's reasons for this. Postal usage is way down. I write way few letters than I used to. The buildings are now too big for the volume of mail that they handle. And they tend to be in congested central business districts where it's hard for the mail trucks to get in and out. Some of the buildings aren't up to modern accessibility or earthquake standards. And the real estate is valuable. And a lot of people believe that the post office should be privatized. But when this happens, as this slide says, it leaves a hole in the fabric of the community. The buildings that gave the town their focus are demolished or sold. This is the post office building in Ukiah, California. It was built in 1937, I see. And it had inside a beautiful mural called The Resources of the Soil. And here's that mural now. I read that it's being restored and that it will be returned to the community and put up somewhere else. We shall see. This is the post office in Venice, California. It was sold to a movie producer on the condition that he keep the lobby open and let the public see the amazing mural, The History of Venice, that is in that lobby. He went broke. The building is now owned by some foreign conglomerate, and nobody can see the mural and nobody can use the building. It's sort of in limbo. Now, to be fair, a lot of murals do get moved from discontinued post offices. These murals were in the Eureka, California post office, and they've been moved to the courtroom in the courthouse in McKinleyville, California. And in fact, I'm going to read to you something that the post office wrote. When the Postal Service anticipates transferring ownership of a building containing New Deal artwork, the Federal Preservation Officer will take steps to safeguard such artwork, may relocate the artwork to another facility, leave the artwork in place under a loan arrangement with the new owner, or move it to a government or private museum, library, art center, historical society, or similar nonprofit organization. So many murals that were originally in post offices are still available to the public. But what about the buildings? Well, this one is now the headquarters of a commercial real estate broker, a restaurant, an investment banker, a furniture store, the entrance to a condominium complex, and a luxury hotel, where I just read today the representatives of many foreign countries doing business with the United States spent a lot of money renting luxurious suites. But look at this one. This is now the Department of Public Works. It is possible to keep public buildings public, to find new ways for them to work for the public, even if they are no longer suitable to be the entire post office. In fact, the General Services Administration issued an executive order that directed federal agencies to locate their operations in established downtowns and to give first consideration to locating in historic properties in central business areas. So here's an ad for the old Richmond post office. And I'm not sure you can read the type, but it says centrally located in the heart of downtown Richmond, near two of the largest employers in downtown Richmond, nearly 1,000 new housing units to be located just blocks away. Well, this is a great piece of property. It belongs to us. Why not keep it? Okay, it has excess capacity, it needs remodeling, but it could be used for something. So what do you do with a well-located, architecturally welcoming building that people have been going in and out of for generations, that has excess capacity, that needs renovation, without selling it to some developer at a giveaway price? Well, I got some ideas. It could be a Social Security office. You could have an IRS help desk. You could distribute food stamps, coupons, licenses, permits, tax forms, passport applications, visa renewal, public internet access. A food bank or an employment service could be located in some of that extra room, or a branch library. There should be ballot boxes plus support for voting by mail. And as the delivery fleet goes electric, you could have public charging stations in the parking lot. But that's not all. You could bring back postal banking. Up until 1967, the post office was a bank. It offered a public alternative to the commercial banking system. It offered basic financial services with your account protected by the full faith and credit of the United States. This was even before the FDIC, when putting your money in a private bank was risky. 2 senators, guess who, and 3 congresspeople have introduced a bill for a pilot program to bring back postal banking. It would be a nonprofit bank offering low-cost savings accounts, credit cards, ATMs, and loans. You know, now that mega banks are not much interested in retail banking, the fees are high, the hours are cut, it's ridiculous that we should have for-profit paycheck cashing services and payday loan services and tax refund loan services. This is a public function, and it could be done out of the post office, as it was very successfully before. The Inspector General of the United Postal Service put out a report about partnering with wellness organizations. You've got a building with a lot of excess room. You could rent part of it. You could go into partnership with somebody. I circled some of the ideas I thought were most interesting: delivery of medicine and nutrition supplements, letter carriers alerting wellness organizations about older adults in need, verified and secure messaging between patient and healthcare provider, wellness organizations offering services through postal windows, advertising wellness programs in post offices, and I would add, since 2015, home test distribution and vaccinations. Another report from the Office of the General of the Post Office foresaw the post office as a sort of center for electronic government, a really futuristic thing. It could have, among other things, certified email, a postal digital ID, document notarization, high-speed internet access. And this is really interesting: in-person verification and biometric data collection. There's going to be an increasing need to bring the physical world and the electronic world together and to establish the identity of people and their credentials beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's going to mean showing up in person and interacting in some way with the electronic system. And this should not be done by a private corporation. This is a job of a government, and it could be so easily done at the post office. Well, this is getting all kind of nerdy, but obviously there are things that could be done to turn the post office into a government center that would not just do postal business, but all kinds of other things. And I think what we're thinking about is an updated form of this: a building that's shared by government offices and appropriate complementary commercial enterprises, public services and private services. And it could be, again, a community center for reliable official information, and, you know, perhaps a place where people would get together. Before I go, I want to remind you that Berkeley, California, fought to keep their historic post office from being sold to a developer, and succeeded. And many of my Living New Deal colleagues were very active in this movement, and they said it just right: our post office is an important part of our history. So I want to close with this mural. You can see the letters just pouring out of the train and filtering down into the countryside, into the city, old people, young people. And what it says along the bottom is: messenger of sympathy and love, servant of parted friends, consoler of the lonely, bond of the scattered family, enlarger of the common life. And I would add benevolent link between government and citizen, something that we very much need right now. Okay, thank you.
Barbara, that was so inspiring. Thank you so much for showing us those beautiful photographs.
Yeah, aren't they?
And really, I think they really embody the fabric of the community, as you pointed out. I live in a town that has a New Deal post office that's been privatized in Mill Valley, California. And I used to be able to do my mail business there, but no longer. I don't think we can even enter the lobby. But those post office buildings are fairly recognizable. Was there a standard design for post offices that were repeated around the country?
There were several, depending on the size of the facility. Some were distribution centers and had a larger building, and there was a couple of designs for that. And some, the one that I was talking about that I showed the floor plan of, was the sort of your classic small town post office. And yes, it was repeated over and over again.
With the murals that we saw, were those painted right there in the post office, or were they painted elsewhere and then installed in the post office?
They were mostly painted elsewhere. They were painted on canvas. The artist was asked to actually visit the town before he or she started working, and talk to people and pick up some local color and, you know, show around some sketches. But the mural itself was painted in a studio usually, and then glued to the wall. And then, thank goodness, because that's how that they're able to remove them if they need to. And then, you know, the artist would then be, you know, come and do a little touch up.
And did the people from the community or the postmaster there have any say into what the murals portrayed?
Sometimes it was encouraged that they do it. And some artists really tried to go down and have like little public meetings and, you know, find out what the people in the town were the most proud of or were most interested in. Apparently, a lot of times they kind of got corralled by the local eccentric or the local history buff, and it, you know, proved to be a mixed blessing. But input from the community was really important. And as you saw in that that New Yorker cover, when the mural was actually being put up and glued to the wall and the finishing touches put up, crowds gathered to sort of see, well, what are they doing in our post office?
Interesting. Yeah. Are you aware of any of the murals that were being rejected?
Yeah. What I know about was in a town in Southern Illinois, I don't remember which it was, but it had an amazing flood, right? You know, the Mississippi and Missouri had overflowed their banks, and it was the Great Flood of 18 something something. The biggest thing that ever happened in the town, but it was, you know, a disaster where many people were killed. And the post office or the postmaster was very unhappy that his town was being memorialized for something so unpleasant that they would actually rather forget. So it was that kind of thing. You know, postmasters are kind of boosterish, and they, of course, wanted their town put in the best light possible. And some of these artists were a little contrarian. So
yeah, it looked like so many of the murals that you showed sort of idealized this kind of small town feeling, this kind of Americana. And I'm just wondering, were there guidelines for what these artists were directed to paint?
Very few. No nudity, no propaganda, interpret that as you will. But other than that, they really had free reign. I'm sorry, I've been talking a little too long.
Oh, okay. Well, I hope that you can answer a couple questions that have come in.
Sure.
Okay. So one person who wrote in was curious about seeing your documentary, Silver Lining, and I'm wondering, is that available?
I believe it's available through the Living New Deal website, is it not? If not, it's on YouTube, and I could put the URL in the chat.
There's also, are you okay?
Yeah.
Can you just remind us how much an artist got paid for painting a mural?
An artist could make between $400 and $800, depending on the size of the mural. It was a lot of money then. Artists who worked for the WPA got $92 a month. So to get $800 for a mural was substantial.
And no, today it looks almost sentimental about how people perceive the postal service and what it provided to communities. And I think people, stand in line, they get really discouraged and frustrated with the postal service. What do you think about, what the postal service really stands for today compared to then, or how it might be portrayed in some modern murals?
Well, yeah, I'm the first to admit that New Deal murals did present an idealized vision of whatever they were showing, by and large. But I think we have to remember that the Postal Service has been really underfunded for many decades. And, the excuse that's given is that the use of the Postal Service is way down. But it's kind of a vicious cycle, because the use of the Postal Service is way down because people find that it's crowded, they have to stand in line, or they find that it's not giving them up-to-date services. So my point would be, if we were to reinvest in the post office and sort of related services that might be in the same building with it or share the same personnel, we could have a really wonderful presence of the federal government that would be really useful to people and would, again, kind of have this sense of we're all tied together, and the government actually works for us, provides a service that we really can use.
One of the people who wrote in was curious about whether Noguchi had done any other public murals.
I don't think so, but I don't know. I don't think so, but if you go to the New Deal Art Registry, www New Deal Art Registry, we have a list by artist. You can look up an artist and it'll show you every location where he or she did a work of art. So you could look that up. I would do it myself, but I'm on this webinar.
The New Deal Art Registry.org.
Right.
Okay. One of our participants observed that, Black people, people of color have often found work within the Postal Service, but very few seem to be depicted in the post office murals. And I was just wondering, why do you think that is?
I think that Black people were not working as much for the Postal Service in the 1930s as subsequently. And I also think that, artists had the same blind spot as everybody else. There are a couple of Black people in those early post office sorting scenes, but it's true. The jolly postman is always a white man.
Yeah,
I want to just remind you, these murals, the last of them were painted in 1943, 1944. It was a while ago.
Yeah, and I'm aware, as I think many of our participants in the webinar are, that some of these post office murals are kind of the source of controversy in communities. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Oh boy, that's a big question.
That's a whole
That
webinar,
is a
really.
different question. What's on the wall of a public building can't help but be seen as the official position of the government. So it's important to be really careful about public art. I love New Deal art very much. And I think the story of how it came to be created is an important one. And I think in general, it was progressive art. But I also see that times have changed and that you can't look at everything in historical context. And that if you walk into a building like a post office and don't feel comfortable there, then the government is not serving you. So I'm really of two minds about this. I hate seeing these post offices where there is now a black plastic where a mural used to be, because I think if looked at in context, any one of them would be a valuable educational, if not aesthetic experience. But I can see why other people would differ, and I'm not sure I would die on that sword.
One of the things that you pointed out in your talk was during the New Deal, 1% of a building's construction costs were dedicated to decorating that building. Is there anything like that today?
I believe that's still true of new federal buildings. And they do have there is nice art in new federal buildings. There are nice, sculptures and some beautiful textile things.
One of the things that one of our Living New Deal team members mentioned is that the post office art ennobled and just referred to some of the demoralization among employees at the Postal Service now. And, I think we're also aware that there's a postmaster general of the post office that has been making some major shifts. Do you want to mention that at all?
This goes hand in hand with what I said about the post office being starved of funding increasingly. I think mostly for ideological reasons. I think some people think that mail could be delivered better by the private, federal FedExes and UPSs of the world. But of course, they can pick and choose their customers, and they don't have an obligation to serve the whole nation equally. I'm really much more interested in seeing whether we can't use the existing post office structure to build a more comprehensive set of government services that wouldn't just be delivering mail, but that would be the whole interface between the federal government and the citizen, everything that it does, voting and licenses and applications and COVID notices. And if they can put up pictures of the most wanted criminals, they can put up information about vaccinations and pandemics and things. It would be really good to have a multi-purpose government service building. And I don't think working there would be demoralizing at all. It would just it takes budget.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for showing us these really interesting and beautiful slides and the ways in which our country really respected and venerated the Postal Service.
Right.
And
artists.
And artists for the New Deal. So I just want to thank you for this amazing presentation about the mail, and also offering a vision for how post offices can better serve the communities in which they still exist. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask people again. Hopefully you'll be interested in hanging out for a few more minutes to see our PBS NewsHour segment about the Living New Deal. But before we go there, I just want to mention some upcoming webinars that we have between now and the end of the year. And I invite you to go to our website, livingnewdeal.org, to sign up for them. We have one coming up on November 29th at 5 p.m. Pacific time with filmmakers Deborah Kaufman and Alan Snitto about their film Town Destroyer, which is a documentary about the controversy over Victor Arnatov's mural at George Washington High School. The mural Life of Washington was recently reprieved when a California judge ruled it illegal for the San Francisco School Board to remove the mural from view. And then on Tuesday, December 6th, we'll be hosting Reality Makes Them Dream with two young curators, Josie Johnson of the Cantor Museum at Stanford University and Emmy Mickelvicius of the San Francisco MoMA. And they'll be talking about some of the lesser known New Deal photographers and their often surprising images. And finally, on December 7th, the Living New Deal New York will host a roundtable, the battle between memory and forgetting, which is drawing on connections between the COVID-19 pandemic and the Great Depression. If you want to find out more about what we're up to, you can sign up to receive our invitations and updates on our website, livingnewdeal.org. So thank you, Barbara, so much for this very informative and inspiring talk tonight. And thank you all for joining in the conversation and for supporting our work. Your donations make programs like this free and open to all.